What's going on, y'all? This is Alexander. You are plugged into the Nerd Companion. What's going on, y'all? This is Alexander from the Nerd Companion. We're coming at you with a Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time episode. An instant classic. I have here a fellow hero of time, Mr. Mike, Moonwalk Mike, I call him. He didn't know that until tonight. I had showed him on my phone how he was named on my phone. He was caught off guard.
I'll take it.
So, give us an introduction of who you are, Mike. Who are you?
Well, I'm pretty big into geek culture in general. Do a little bit of everything. Video games, comics, Star Wars, anime. Just tend to dip my hand into a little bit of all of it.
Okay, right on. Mm-hmm. So you said Ocarina of Time is the only Zelda that you played?
Pretty much, yeah. I've known about the games. I keep meaning to play them. I just don't get around to it.
Yeah, I mean, you picked a good one. I want to say that Ocarina of Time and another one is tied for first place. Both for different reasons, but yeah, this is like one of my favorite games of all time. Definitely one of the top, if not the top, Zeldas. I think it's better than Breath of the Wild. Anyone out there that disagrees, I would love to have you on the show. We could talk about it. I don't necessarily hate the game. I just thought it could have been better. But we won't get too much on Breath of the Wild. We'll strictly talk about Ocarina of Time. And I guess that's it, man. So if you think Zelda would make a pretty good anime if they...
I think it definitely could be, and I've seen some fan trailers for possible live actions too, like Tom Holland in an AI trailer with him as Link.
AI is getting out of control.
Yeah,
like you really. There's an interesting account that I follow on Instagram that does like different movie trailers. Like it'll be Lord of the Rings set in 2075 cyberpunk style, and it shows like a whole trailer and it's all AI, and I'm like, what the heck? And I just saw another one. It was like a 1950s shonen samurai version of Lord of the Rings that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I'd pay to see that.
Yeah. No, it definitely looked pretty cool. So how old were you when you played Ocarina of Time?
God, it came out 25 years ago, so
Ish.
Like about 14 at the time. I was living on a military base in Louisiana, Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Okay.
Didn't have the Nintendo 64 myself, so I went to a friend's house and played after school. And it was one of the first games where I had to think a little more strategically. Like, before that, Sonic the Hedgehog, Mario is pretty much just run and jump, play straightforward. Yeah. And this one was the first one, I think, that you had like multi-functions for the buttons. So instead of just like dash, dash, dash for the same button, it depended on what was going on in the game for it to change.
For sure. No, Nintendo 64 did a really good job of introducing like the 3D world, at least on the console platform, for sure. I mean, you had PC doing it, but having it on the console at a more affordable price was definitely groundbreaking for the casual gamer, for sure. I would say it's probably like the same time frame. I played it on 64 when it was popular. I don't know if I played it like when it first came out. I went over to a friend's house, Steven, and I just remember spending summers over there playing that game. That and Doom 64, but a lot of Ocarina of Time, and that game blew me away. Always been a fantasy guy and really just fell into the game. But yeah, so I guess, in the game you start out as Link, the hero of time. He wakes up in the village with everyone's favorite sidekick that did not ever get annoying.
Not at all.
Hey, listen. What was going through your head when you're playing through the village, like getting acclimated to the game?
Kind of tell that the sidekick, what was her name again?
Navi.
Navi. Yeah, Navi. She was definitely. It was kind of obvious it was meant to be there to help guide the character with learning the moves. It's a little different from the games nowadays where you've got like tutorial levels where you practice the moves instead of someone telling you what to do.
Right. Or just like an awkward prompt or like something to pause the game.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it did pause the game whenever she got your attention. No, I was just really blown away, and it probably had a big it probably had a lot to do with the fact that I myself was a kid, playing a kid, living in a 3D world, like going on this big adventure. And the opening scene with Ganondorf coming and I can't remember exactly how much they showed in that beginning clip where Ganondorf was chasing Zelda and Impa.
Yeah, it was like a prophetic dream, wasn't it?
Yeah, like he woke up. Yeah. Which is always like a really awesome way to start a story, is with a prophetic dream. Those are like awesome ways to start a story. Classic fantasy. But yeah, I want to say prior to this, the first Zelda game that I played was Link to the Past. So I was used to playing Zelda from an eagle eye view, which I actually still like. I wish they would make more of them. I really enjoy that style of Zelda. I'm not saying I don't like the 3D. I love the 3D. I think they should do both. But I just really felt immersed, and I really felt that the graphics couldn't get any better. But here we are today. It's funny going back and playing it and noticing the difference between 60 frames per second and 30. You're just like, oh, so cringy. And coincidentally, this was the first game that my son played and beat. So I don't feel like I could have done any better as a dad to introduce him to the gaming world. But yeah, you start out in the village and you are basically just trying to get your shield and sword. I can't remember the bully that won't let you go to the Deku Tree, which you have. I can't remember who tells you or that you need to go there. I'm not sure if the Deku Tree reached out to him or if it was Navi that was basically, because Navi came from the Deku Tree, right? It seemed like they were having a conversation before.
Yeah, I thought like the Deku Tree like on its last legs, and it was trying to tell him some things right before it died. Yeah,
so Ganondorf had come to, as we know that Ganondorf is the villain. He grew up in I'm doing a podcast on Zelda. I don't remember the name of the village, but he came from the tribe of women that was all women, and they were women fighters, warriors, and he was raised there.
Was it the Shadow Tribe? Like there were different sages, I remember. And
no, it was like the desert place. It was I can't remember what it's called.
Oh, the one that Sheik is from.
The Gerudo.
Yeah.
So he came from the Gerudo, and the whole prophecy behind that is that the Gerudo were all women race. I can't remember how they reproduce.
There was like one male born every like 100 years or something.
Right, and it was a prophecy that when this male came to be, that they would all, like, I guess, follow him, or like he was supposed to mean something prophetically to move that race forward. And so Ganondorf is the male, the prophecy child from the Gerudo race. And so he's basically trying to make an alliance with the king of Hyrule. And the king is not giving him time of day. So he's kind of wanting to seize power. Ultimately, I think he's going to betray the king to seize power over Hyrule anyway. But he was trying to at least be diplomatic. And as diplomatic as a sleazeball would be, like a, evil advisor. But he basically knew he wasn't going to get power, and so he had visited the Deku Tree to see if he could get the 3 crystals, because he knew that he could go into the Temple of Time and have access to that power. So he went to the Deku Tree, asked for the Emerald Crystal, and the Deku Tree denied him, so Ganondorf put a curse on him, essentially.
Yeah.
And he was going to die. And so you start out like trying to get over to the Deku Tree. I think the Deku Tree knew that he was going to die, and he was letting Link, the hero of time, conquer the temple as a test to see if he was a worthy hero that could basically fulfill the prophecy of getting the Triforce where it needed to go.
Yeah.
What did you think about that temple?
The temple of time.
The dungeon, I should say, the Deku Tree dungeon that, every Zelda, classic Zelda game has the dungeons. It's kind of like their formula that they do, except for Breath of the Wild. Shame. But yeah, what were you gonna say?
No, it's just like the dungeons in Ocarina of Time. As far as like the one that the Deku Tree is in, I honestly don't remember too much about it, but I do remember noticing that I did like seeing the differences with those dungeons and with the different areas that you're visiting according to the time travel.
Right. Yeah, the Deku Tree dungeon was really cool. It kind of it teaches you the mechanics. You start seeing like the old patterns that you see in like the older Zelda games, like like these fires to open up a door. Or there's like these little different puzzle that you have to solve in order to get to like the next room, which is like the formula that makes Zelda and put Zelda on the map, right? So you get the crystal, and then the Deku Tree basically says like, all right, well, guess what? You got to get 2 more. Like any other video game, just task you out until the end of the game. And there's some things that you got to do in the village, some little hidden side quests that you can get more, expansion of your ruby bag and stuff like that. But then you leave and you go into you can talk about your favorite companion that you mentioned before we started the recording.
Oh, the owl.
The cursed owl.
The mother effing owl. Yeah, it's that has got to be one of the most annoying video game characters I've ever encountered.
Organically, when my son played, he hated the owl.
Yeah.
And anytime that we saw it, he was like, "Oh no, the owl!" Just like I did, because as we were saying before, like if you're just trying to click through, like okay, yeah, I know what I need to do. It would ask you, like, do you understand? And it would always put the cursor on no. So if you were just clicking, he would hit no, and then you'd have to go through the whole conversation again. And I can't tell you how many times I was like wanting to throw the controller for trying to speed run the conversation. The owl. But yeah, so, I mean, what did you think about leaving the village and discovering the fields of Hyrule?
It was like aside from the first-person shooters like Doom, where you're exploring in that kind of capacity, it was the first type of game that I played where it was more of a 3D experience.
Yeah.
Getting the opportunity to actually kind of look around, explore on your own, and not always in an immediate sense of danger was kind of nice. It kind of lets you take in the experience of Hyrule instead of just jumping from one thing to the next immediately.
Right. Really kind of gave you and when this game was made, you definitely felt like this world was open.
Yeah. And
which I really enjoyed. Couple things you can do before making your way over to, I guess, the red crystal that you would get over at Death Mountain.
Yeah.
I'm fired. Before you get to Death Mountain, you can go to the ranch, which you can kind of do some things to make things easier as you progress through the game, or you can go straight to it, which was something I really liked because you didn't really, and as you said, you really didn't have to go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Like there was always something for you to do in between, what kind of gave you moments of respite, like while you were kind of like grinding all this stuff. Was there anything you wanted to touch up on before getting over?
Nothing specifically. What were your thoughts on getting all 3 of the crystals in terms of like difficulty level? Do you feel back then it was
back then I felt like it was challenging. I don't remember feeling completely overwhelmed until getting to the water crystal, Jabu.
That wasn't in the underwater temple, was it? Or
oh god, yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah,
that one I think to this day is one of the most annoying, redundant dungeons in probably history of any sort of game. Even as an adult, I was frustrated with it. But I remember Jabu being annoying, and basically, like, I don't like when I have to keep going back to do one thing, carrying the Zora around, and I just felt like it was just such an encumbrance that I was more annoyed than the actual, like, embracing that she was just wanted to be treated like a princess and carried everywhere. Like, I really grew to hate her, in a sense. She just felt like more of an encumbrance than a companion.
I mean, think about it. It kind of teaches you about dating for later.
Oh, no shots fired. Yeah, the things men do for women.
Yeah.
To go back to the bosses, to the bosses, I think like each dungeon had really good bosses that incorporated the item that you would get in the dungeon in order to beat the boss. And really liked it with the slingshot and the Deku Tree. I loved the use of bombs and the Death Mountain, and then using, it was the boomerang and Lord Jabu Jabu. I love the boomerang. I thought Jabu Jabu was going to be the most annoying part, but we all know where we're going with the most annoying part of the game. But yeah, when I played this game and got all 3 stones, I literally thought that this was the end of the game. And it sure felt like it, because it took me a while to get to the Temple of Time.
Yeah.
To unlock it. So I was like, oh, okay, this is a really good game.
But how many gameplay hours was that for you?
At that time, I didn't really measure it by hours. It was like how many weeks it took me to beat it. You know what I mean? So it felt like it was a while. But playing it as an adult, like, you can definitely smash through all 3 of those temples in one sitting.
Yeah. As
an adult. Especially if you've played it before, you know exactly what to do. But yeah. Is there anything you want to touch up on before we get to the Temple of Time?
No, man.
No?
Yeah.
I really liked the music in the game. I think all of like the familiar themes that they incorporated, that make Zelda felt really good, because we also had a huge upgrade with sound as well as the graphics from one platform generation to the next. But yeah, I remember just being really blown away by the music. Yeah, you can like race Epona or Epony, however you say it, with the evil ranch hand that's trying to take over, to kind of set you up to get that horse later, for the big, reveal for the game. But yeah, you make your way over to the Temple of Time. You submit the 3 stones and the door opens. And at this point, when I'm playing, I'm thinking it's the end of the game. I'm like, okay, cool, decent. And then you go in there, you pull the sword, and you're an adult. And I remember just being like, wait, what? Like, for me, I don't know why I was so surprised, but I was. And I was like, dude, that's literally like maybe the first quarter of the game.
Well, that, and just with the name, you got to figure that there's going to be some sort of time travel element in effect, and we didn't see it up until that point.
Yeah, I think you were older than me, so you probably put that together. I might have been 10 when I was playing it. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just wasn't really piecing too much together. Was playing. I forgot to mention that you get the Ocarina from Sierra, and before leaving the village. But yeah, so you get the Ocarina, which is like what the game's all about, like the Ocarina of Time. I guess I for some reason thought that was the Ocarina of Time.
Remind me, wasn't it like thrown into a nearby lake and it had to be retrieved, or am I misremembering?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I can't remember if it showed in the beginning clip or if it was whenever you, again, approach the drawbridge at Hyrule Castle, where it shows Zelda throwing the Ocarina of Time in the moat around the castle itself. And then you have to go in and get it. Because she's trying to hide it from Ganondorf. Because it's the tool to kind of like basically transport you everywhere, which would have been a tool that he would ultimately used for evil. But yeah, so you make your way, you become an adult, and then you're set out in a whole other adventure that, again, for me was a huge surprise. But you expected that?
Well, I mean, a little bit when I was actively playing it. I wasn't expecting the time lapse for him specifically. I figured he was going to travel through time, not that he was going to age for 7 years, because his body needed to, like, grow accustomed to the Master Sword.
Right, he wasn't strong enough.
Yeah.
So you wake up, and then you have to go back to the village where the Deku Tree was, and everyone is bewildered that you have grown up, because the people that live in the village remain children forever, and they're like, "Oh, you were Link, or you look familiar." They know that they've seen him before, and then you find out that you have to go to these temples to kind of basically get these medallions that will essentially summon all of the fabled sages, right?
Yeah,
because you had one to begin with.
Yeah, and one of the sages had actually taken Ganondorf's place with Gerudo, if I remember.
Yeah, so then you learn that like some of the characters that you were associating with as a kid kind of grew to be into like the protectors of each realm of Hyrule, basically becoming a sage that would ultimately seal the power of evil, right? And it was your job to get the medallion to kind of secure that sage's place in this. It's another dimension that they were planning on keeping.
It was like a pocket dimension or something where they could push him away so he wouldn't be a threat to everyone else.
Right. So you make your way, you go to the forest temple, and you find that Sierra is one of the sages that you have to kind of assimilate by getting the medallion. You're met by a character named Sheik, who is a mysterious figure that is
wearing like head wrappings to conceal their face.
Yeah. And they're very ninja-like. She's very ninja-like. And she kind of aids as like a second kind of like companion that kind of guides you and tells you where you need to go next. So you get the forest temple medallion. This is probably one of my favorite dungeons. It's just kind of like a haunted house in a sense. You gotta like get all the pose, the ghosts. Yeah, so you go in, you basically, there's like 4 different ghosts that you have to basically slay in order to light each one of the pillars of fire that bring you down into the boss, basically. I thought that this dungeon was actually pretty cool. You get the bow and arrow here, and the boss is basically Shadow Ganon, and he's jumping from picture to picture.
Okay.
And you gotta like shoot him and then beat him down. But after you do that, you get your forest medallion, and Sierra waits patiently in that pocket of, or I'm just gonna call it the Shadow Realm. I can't remember what it's called.
No copyright infringement.
Yeah, please don't sue me for the 3 listeners here. So you basically get the medallion, and Sierra basically waits for the rest of the sages in this little pocket of time. And so you make your way to Death Mountain, where you're basically get the fire medallion. This one was kind of fun to me. Did you have anything? Do you remember this one?
This is where they started introducing the different tunics for different levels of like invulnerability or
to the environment.
Yeah.
This one, you couldn't even enter a dungeon without it depleting your hearts because of the heat. So you have to get the red tunic in order to even survive down there. But you have to get the red tunic, and it allows you to survive in the heat environment. I did like the music though. But yeah, so you free that sage, and basically they wait patiently in the pocket of time. Yeah, so after Death Mountain, you get the medallion, and you basically free Durunia. And this Durunia was the character that basically gave you permission to even wander about in the Goron city. And you find that Durunia was the sage that was going to help aid in sealing Ganondorf. I remember the funny dance you do as a kid. In order to like,
what did it look like?
I don't know. It was like you had to play Sierra's song. Okay. You had to play it, and they were dancing. He was like, oh, and all the different pans of the camera, and he's just like dancing. He was like, okay, after you're done, okay, yeah, sure, go in there. But yeah, so you come back to the city, and it's like abandoned. You basically find that Ganondorf had pretty much made the mountain go crazy.
Yeah.
And it had a blazing ring of fire above the top that you actually see when you come out the Temple of Time to begin with, which was interesting because it didn't have that.
Oh, you know what? Link actually gets the fire tunic from Darunia's son, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I think he recognizes him.
Yeah, and he gets the invulnerability, so his health isn't affected, and he get transported to the death. That's where he gets transported to the Death Mountain crater.
No, I think you have to climb to the top.
Okay.
I think you have to climb to the top of the mountain, and that's where you enter. Because if you go up there before, you can't even go inside without having your hearts depleted. So you know that, like, okay, this is like a soft check. Like, okay, I'm missing something. Like, I got to go back, and that's what prompts you to go back to Goron City, which is what I did as a kid. Because I think I definitely wanted to get up to the top of the mountain and realize, like, oh no, I'm missing something. So we had to go back and kind of explore, which again makes the game so good. It's like they give you the opportunity to go explore, and then you're like, oh, I can't do this. I got to go back and do something else to gain access to this, which is cool. I think the next one is probably the worst dungeon of all, the infamous Water Temple.
That's where you had to use the weighted boots, right?
Yeah,
that was annoying.
Yeah, it was the most redundant temple ever made for any game. It is so annoying. Even as an adult, like I can, beat it in a couple hours, but it is so annoying. I hate that one. Like,
Is it just the repetition, or?
I just hate having to go back and then like use the way to boot. Like it was like ergonomically cumbersome. Like you had to go back into your menu, click the boots, exit back out, then go back in, wear your regular boots. It was just like, oh my! I wish there was just like a hot button for it, like the switch. I mean, now in today's technology with gaming, like there'd probably be an easier way to do it. But back then, like going to the pause menu, and like it was so annoying. On top of the already annoying environment that the temple put you through.
And Princess Ruto's annoying behavior too.
Yeah, like why am I even saving you? Like you put me through so much, but she remembers your good deeds and absolutely adores you.
And decides that you're her fiance.
Yeah. If it were only that easy. But it really wasn't that easy. He had to work for that.
A little bit, yeah.
So Princess Ruto is the next sage. And before I go into that, one of my favorite parts of the game is actually in that temple where you fight Evil Link or Shadow Link. I remember that being really difficult. And I remember beating it with my sword, but you get the hammer in the temple, and that's like the way to beat it easily is with the hammer. If you attack him with your hammer. Because it goes through his sword. Okay. And my son actually beat him with the sword as well. He was just in there button mashing. And he was excited when he did that. So you get the Water Temple Medallion, where Ruto is the sage that will wait patiently in that pocket of time to seal Ganondorf. The next one, you go back to the village that's under Death Mountain to get to your next one. This one was kind of eerie, the Shadow Temple. When you're entering the village, you're prompted with a cutscene where basically like there's like this shadow monster that's basically going around messing everything up, and the cloaked figure Sheik is there trying to fight it. And you go basically into the Shadow Temple. Basically,
but don't you need like a certain song to get in?
Yeah, well, you need a song for everyone.
Okay.
Or at least to have the ability to transport you there.
Got it.
But you always learn the song before you get into any of the temples. And then I don't remember having too much trouble as a kid, but as an adult, I was having issues with this one for some reason. I don't know why. I was like missing some switches and like moving boxes into walls that weren't really walls. You needed the magnifying glass to see through like the walls that were just apparitions and not actual physical wall.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, this is one of my favorite boss fights too, is the Bongo ghost that uses the phantom hands that come and claps on you.
Kind of like a drum.
Yeah, that's basically you're on the platform that you're on. You're basically like a big drum. It's like you're standing on a drum. He's just like this ghost that's just hitting this drum. It was really cool.
You had to keep a beat.
Had to, man. I was trying to. When I was playing with my son, I played through like Dark Souls games and like the really like meticulous planning combat kind of games. And I was like literally applying that stuff to this fight because you're really watching the patterns of the boss to see what he does. I feel like this one, like you really had to kind of like really see what Bongo was doing to kind of do it. But once you figure it out, you just crush him. You find that Impa, the guardian of Princess Zelda, is the sage that is basically the guardian of this temple. The Shadow Medallion then kind of like puts her into that pocket of time to kind of seal Ganondorf into that realm. So, everything's moving forward and you're kind of seeing, everything kind of like play out, and you're sent to go to the Gerudo's Fortress to do the Light Temple. They had an interesting little prerequisite before you get there, having to like kind of like sneak through like Metal Gear Solid style to kind of like release like the 4 people that needed to get back to the village.
I remember that. And how often were you getting caught with that?
I got caught quite often, even as an adult.
I remembered I had to start over repeatedly to get through that.
Yeah. No, I think that's common. I think what makes it difficult is like the ability to kind of like pan around the corner to see where they're walking. Again, now with like modern games, you have the 2 joysticks, so you can kind of like peer around the corner. Like this one's difficult because you had the 1 joystick and you had to like face that direction and move the camera, and you couldn't like switch back unless you like turned around, and then it caused you to move out into the hallway, and then they caught you. It was just, it's kind of just awkward controls. But at the time they were really good, but very outdated control wise. But yeah, you get to see the that race that Ganondorf came from. You get to see the race of women who are supposed to be the elite when it comes to archery and sword fighting. So it's kind of, only fitting for the villain to come from there, from someone who is like basically a master at combat. And there always was like a mystical force with the Gerudo people, but that is because of the boss of I believe it's because of the boss of the Spirit Temple, which is the two witches.
It also kind of helps to explain the natural kind of aggression that Ganondorf has. That you get raised in kind of a combat-centered culture, it's going to be more likely that you're going to think in those terms.
In regard to getting things done?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lack of diplomacy, for sure. He was actually, if you think about it, he was actually quite diplomatic. He really did kind of go into Hyrule wanting an advisor role and trying to see if he could take it, but, ultimately it came down to the fact that he was just going to take it by force if needed be. So you beat the witches, you get the spirit medallion. You basically have all the medallions necessary to get back to Hyrule, which has been basically under siege under Ganondorf's rule. One of the things about Hyrule in the future is that those zombies, man, like they scared me so much as a kid.
Didn't we skip a sage? The Sage of Light?
Which one was that one?
Wasn't that the one that Link wakens up to? And he explains what Ganondorf had done.
So I think that's the one that's given to you when you pull the sword. I think you have the one.
Okay.
I believe so. I don't think it's a temple itself, right? Is it? I don't think it's a temple. I think you have one to start with, or you're given one at the end.
Okay.
I want to say you start with it.
Okay. I think I was thinking of the leader of the sages as one of the sages too.
Yeah, Rauru. I think he's one of the.
I thought
one of the three.
I thought Zelda was considered the leader of the sages.
She's the leader, but so Zelda is the leader. Rauru is the one who initially appears to you when you become an adult to kind of inform him, hey, this is what you got to do. He's the one that kind of pushes him as an adult, like, you got to get the rest of these medallions so that the sages can come to power, so that we have the power to seal Ganondorf. After you get those, after you get the sages, I believe that Link has a part of the Triforce, Zelda has a part of the Triforce, and then Ganondorf has a part of the Triforce.
That's right, yeah. Ganondorf has the part related to power, Zelda has the part related to wisdom, and Link has the part related to courage.
Right. Unbeknownst to you, having gone through all of these trials and tribulations to get to Ganondorf, ultimately puts you in the position that he wants you in anyway, which is in his presence.
Yeah.
Because he... Go ahead.
No.
Because he basically has the power to draw all the Triforce anyway.
Wasn't also part of the purpose of the maybe I'm misremembering, but wasn't part of the purpose of him undergoing all those trials with the sages also to kind of cement his position as the wielder for the courage?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so yeah, he gets that, and Ganondorf is still wanting absolute control. He's got control in general right now, but not over everything, because what he got was an imperfected version of the power, pretty much.
Yeah. He was kind of trying to work different plans all at the same time, and all of them were kind of not coming to fruition. I think he originally was just going to take Hyrule without the Triforce. Then he was like, okay, well, then I just get the crystals to have this, the ability to go through time. And then that didn't happen, so now he's like, okay, well, I'm just going to use the Triforce, which is basically the ultimate weapon.
Yeah.
And so you get there, you make your way through the intricate, the last dungeon, which kind of gives you a little sampler pack of each temple that you have gone through before. And making your way to the top, you see Ganondorf basically taking Zelda's portion of the Triforce.
God, don't you remember how many stairs there were getting to the top?
Oh my God.
How long did it take? It felt like it took 5 or 10 minutes just to climb the stairs.
Yeah. And all the different levels and the little mini bosses you had to fight on the way up.
Yeah.
It was quite a trek, for sure. Yeah.
You can get up to the top. I think you're right. Or wait, doesn't Zelda actually still retain at least part of it, that's how she's able to create the light arrows for him?
I want to say, for some reason in my head, I feel like Ganondorf took the power. He did, or maybe he just put her in a prison, like some sort of like enchanted shell to where she couldn't do anything.
And this was after you end up finding out that Sheik is actually Zelda.
Correct.
Yeah.
The big reveal.
Yeah.
So you find out that Sheik is actually Zelda.
See, that's what I was saying that was why I was counting her on his side already. When we were talking like the count of 6 or 7, I wasn't considering Rauru with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with like, what was your impression with that final boss fight?
The one where he's Ganondorf, or when he turned to Ganon?
No, when Ganondorf.
So it was basically like you had to. I don't remember as a kid, I don't remember having trouble, but as an adult, this frustrated me trying to bounce the beams, the ball, energy ball, back and forth for some reason. I don't know what was. Maybe I was position drawn on these pillars, but yeah. I mean, I liked it. I liked it a lot.
It felt kind of like a 3D version of Pong.
Yeah, no, it's basically what it is. You're basically playing Pong. I mean, did you like the boss fight?
Yeah, I think I liked the second half more, with where he actually becomes Ganon and transforms using his part of the Triforce.
With this, my last playthrough, I found myself having issues with resources to getting him down. Like, I was running out of arrows, and then I was running out of magic, and I know that he destroys the environment for you to get these things, but for some reason I kept running out of resources. So it took me a couple tries, and I'm not sure what I was doing wrong. But
do you think you were playing actually too efficiently, like trying to get too much done too quickly so he didn't have time to do it?
No, I don't know. I mean, at the end, I ended up, of course, beating it, but I can't remember why. I don't know. I can't remember, because then because she does something, because you lose your Master Sword, right?
Yeah,
and that's the reason why you're having to rely on all these weapons that you've basically collected.
I thought you eventually had to pick between didn't you also with this one have to pick between a sword and a hammer to beat him?
Well, I think you have to use the hammer, because I don't think you have the sword yet. I think once you get him down to a certain, like once you do a certain amount of damage, that's when Zelda intervenes, breaks the little barrier, and then you can get to your sword to deliver like the last remaining blows.
Got it.
Yeah. And then, of course, after you rescue the princess, you have that 10-minute timer where you have to run all the way back down the stairs to finally getting out. And, you get down, you rescue the princess, and you basically get sent back to a kid. And this is where things get interesting, because I think at this point you lose Navi. Like, Navi's no longer there.
I think so.
And then you don't know if she's dead or just wandered off. And so...
But you retain all of the information, like all of the knowledge of everything that you went through. So
this is where I think it gets interesting. All right, so you're saying that he retains the information, right?
I thought so, because I
thought so too.
He goes back to Zelda as a kid, retaining all of the information so he could potentially stop it.
All right. So he does. So he retains the information. And so, assuming that I'm going to go off the story that you're saying, okay? So let's wrap up the game. So he gets sent off, and they catch Ganondorf. He gets arrested, or they seal him into the thing. The sages seal him, and he gets put into basically his like the shadow, like whatever realm that he's in. Right?
Yeah.
The evil realm. And then at the time that the game is made, you have Child Link, who has all the information, and then is supposed to live like this normal life, essentially.
Pretty
it's
much.
Supposed to be. Okay. So this is where things get interesting. So whenever you're the child and you go into the Temple of Time for the first time, the act of drawing the sword and how time travel and something as delicate as that were to happen breaks the time continuum.
Okay.
So this was now like as other Zelda games are getting made, the timeline is now starting to piece together. Okay, so you have Skyward Sword, which is supposed to be chronologically the first game, and the premise of the story is basically, all these people lived in the sky, and what happens is that Ganon basically represents all of hatred and is at war with Zelda. Basically, Zelda chooses a champion. The champion goes through his trials and tribulations, and ultimately at the end of the game, you slay Ganon, but he puts a curse on Link and on Zelda, forever imprinting himself onto them.
Okay.
Which starts this cycle of the hero of time that must emerge because Ganon comes and like destroys everything, making the need for the hero of time to come forth and vanquish evil, so that Princess Zelda can rule over a peaceful time. So the end of the game, you kill Ganon, but he imprints it, and that kind of sets the story of oh, this is why this game has different iterations. Because each game is a different part in the timeline where this cycle has come up again.
Okay.
Okay, so that's why you always see the reemergence of Ganon in most of the games. So then you have Minish Cap and Four Swords that take place after that lead into Ocarina of Time. So now we're in Ocarina of Time. Child Link for the first time pulls the sword, and as he pulls it, 3 things happen. He goes into the future, right?
Wait, and so, I thought when Link pulled the sword, it wasn't at that point. It wasn't specifically time travel. I thought it was giving him his body 7 years to actually grow accustomed to the power of wielding it.
I can't remember if it's him going back or the time. I think by pulling the sword, the Master Sword,
okay,
it alters time itself, because he's able to come back and forth through time. Just like it as used as a mechanic to go, because you do in the game, you go back as a kid as in the game.
Yeah.
In Ocarina of Time, there's this continuum of time that's obviously being manipulated.
Yeah.
Right. And so when he pulls it out, you're breaking. What you're doing is you're breaking the fabric of time, and so by initially pulling it out, the fabric of time shatters.
Okay.
Okay. And what you're doing when you're playing the game is you're playing through one specific timeline, and you don't even know it. You're actually playing through 2. Well, you might be playing through all 3. But the kicker for all of this is that when he goes back, so there's one timeline that cycles off, is if Ganondorf kills the hero of time Link. Okay? And if he dies, then you go into the Fallen Hero timeline, where it's the Link to Past, Ages and Seasons, Link's Awakening, and A Link Between Two Worlds. Okay? And then you get to the original ones, Legend of Zelda, and then Adventure Link. This is the timeline where the hero dies, and in the beginning of Link to Past, it talks about how there was a hero, he was killed by Ganon, and then Ganon basically was able to get into the Shadow world and create his own bad place.
Okay.
You never played A Link to the Past?
No.
So in A Link to the Past, you basically, it's kind of almost the same mechanic where you go into a shadow realm. You don't necessarily go through time, but you go into basically the shadow version of Hyrule. And that's where he, in Ocarina of Time, was sent to, where he was supposed to be in prison, but he made it his home. And it was a mirror. It was like a negative image of what Hyrule was supposed to be in peace. It's just Hyrule in chaos.
Okay.
And so you have that timeline going through. If Link died.
Okay.
Now, with the narrative that you stated, that he goes back and has this memory of everything he's done, you have the child hero timeline, where he goes back. He knows that Navi is missing, and that's where he wanders off into Majora's Mask, where he doesn't have Navi, but he's looking for Navi.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the premise of the game, and then he kind of gets mixed up in some stuff in Majora's, and then this one goes into Twilight Princess, and what is it? Spirit Adventures, I never played that one.
Hmm.
And then you have the missing hero, where he doesn't come back at all. He stays as an adult, I think. And then that's when you get the Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. And so you have all these different things if one of the situations played out as is. And with Breath of the Wild, that's where it's supposed to be a convergence of all of it coming back to Breath of the Wild. If that makes any sense.
It does, but how does the sort of shadow timeline, the fallen hero timeline, kind of reconcile with the other two for Breath of the Wild?
Like, how does it play into Breath of the Wild?
Yeah, it's because you've got it sounds like you've got one version of Link who's a child, one version who's an adult, and then you've got the other version where he's been killed off. So how do these three timelines converge?
So basically, when you play Breath of the Wild, like, I'm not giving too much away, Link wakes up in a vat and he's like in a cave. And then he has to go slay Ganon.
Okay.
Like the cycle goes in circles. So he has to do it again. From what I'm understanding of the story without having done too much research, when arriving from the past, so basically this is what happens. Zelda and Link explore the catacombs of the castle. At least from the beginning standpoint, if the premise of Breath of the Wild, it was that Ganon had come back and he had basically taken over Hyrule. Link and 4 other warriors from each region had basically couldn't kill him, but basically put him in a sealed place inside of the castle. And the premise of the game is to get these 4 companions back, who are champions of their own realm, to embody these large machines, in a sense, these magical machines, these guardians, to basically attack, to have the power to attack Ganon and kill him.
Okay.
So that's the premise of the game. So you wake up after, because whenever they sealed Ganon in the first part of the game, Link was basically killed or presumed dead. So that's why he's in that vat.
Okay.
And so the whole time you're trying to like find memories to see what happened. So, and Zelda is in the castle being held captive. So I'm assuming that the fallen hero somehow reemerges in Breath of the Wild as the cycle would continue. So in this timeline, this whole cycle has gone through, but he is summoned at this point.
It also makes me a little curious if the fallen hero timeline took place in this shadow world where Ganon creates kind of a dark reflection of Hyrule.
No, that's what it is.
Yeah, so but what happens when that's left alone and he's gone? Like when he's gone back to the regular version of Hyrule, like I'm curious how that would have evolved without either of their presence.
Through Breath of the Wild?
Yeah, like how the fallen hero timeline where he's in that shadow version of Hyrule, Ganon gets out, comes back to regular version. I'm kind of curious how that shadow version would evolve without either of the two present.
So you have 3 different things. So it's almost just like there's like a multiverse at this point, right? So they're all acting independently. The fallen hero, the child hero, the missing hero. They're all independent timelines.
Okay.
How they converge, and I haven't played Tears of the Kingdom.
Okay.
But as far as Breath of the Wild is concerned, did not answer that question. But Nintendo, I believe, has come out and said that this is the convergence of all 3 timelines.
Okay.
But they don't go, at least in Breath of the Wild, into an explanation of how that is, how that occurred. Does he have does he have knowledge of all 3 timelines into one person going insane, I imagine?
That would drive me nuts.
But all 3 timelines are supposed to converge into Breath of the Wild, according to multiple sources, and I'm pretty sure Nintendo has confirmed that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that's basically it. So you have the missing hero who never comes back, and all these terrible things happen in this timeline. Then you have the childhood hero who's supposed to live a normal life. And and then
The Fallen Hero.
yeah.
Which timeline was your favorite to play?
I see. There's multiple games in this each timeline that I like and dislike. My favorite out of the 3 timelines is going to be Link to the Past. I for some reason could not get into Majora's Mask. I for some reason could not get into it. Wind Waker bugged me. I need to go back and play them though. I won't lie. Like when I played Wind Waker, I didn't like it. When I played Twilight Princess, I didn't like it. The Zelda Ages and Oracles, like, or Ages and Seasons, like it's fine. Link Awakening was fine. Like they were okay, but I feel like the OGs is like Ocarina of Time, Link to Past, Skyward Sword. Like those were the OGs.
What didn't you like about Twilight Princess?
I hated that you had to keep turning into the wolf.
Okay.
And it felt like I wasn't playing a Zelda game.
Okay.
But I need to go back and play it because my brother swears by Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. He's like, those are like bangers. So I need to go back and play them. I started playing Wind Waker again, and it's like it's okay, but yeah, it's interesting how they split up the timeline and like their justification of why and how they kind of put different games into each timeline as they established.
I mean, when you look at the timelines, it looks like they prioritized one over the others a little bit more. Like, you look at one, you've got the Fallen Hero one, it's got, 7, 8 games in it? And
yeah, so a lot of those were made probably before the 6 that were in the Childhood Hero and the Missing Hero. So they probably threw those in there because I think the theme is that the hero died. Like, there was a great hero, but before Ganon or Ganondorf, like he had somehow succeeded in killing. Because in every story, at least in these, the hero survived, right? But this one, in this timeline, the preface was that the hero had died at the pivotal moment to kind of like prevent all this from happening.
Okay, all right.
And so that's where they kind of threw those in there. But I just found that the interesting thing about the canon timeline is how they did that, and I'm interested to see how they move forward or if they answer those questions. Those that played Tears of the Kingdom, let me know if they answer those questions. I'm not sure. I've watched theories on it, and it's all about kind of like the same things that I've said. They'd probably do a better job in explaining the actual theories, but yeah, dude. I mean, I just thought it was really interesting.
Where would you want to see the games go next? Like, what sort of direction would you want them to take?
I'd want them to go after Breath of the Wild, honestly.
But I mean, in terms of storyline or plot, like, if you could pick an ideal idea for the next game, what would it be?
I think they should definitely do Breath of the Wild, like mechanics, like that open world concept. The graphics were good. Like, I love the gameplay. I love the combat. Like, I feel like it was the most like enjoyable to play in combat. It felt modern. I love the graphics engine. As far as the plot, I think the plot's going to be the same either way, unless they decide that they're going to find a way to end the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And that'd be like the end of it, and then they would just have to make more that go into the other timelines.
I wonder if another way to kind of interpret that curse that Ganon puts on them is, instead of it being separate timelines, it being different reincarnations. So,
Of Zelda or of Link?
or of all of them. Like, they're cursed to basically repeat reincarnations of themselves throughout history and giving him multiple chances to get it right.
Right, so kind of like a Buddhist approach?
Sort of.
Yeah. I think that's where a lot of people thought it was going whenever Breath of the Wild started, because it was like people were saying like, okay, like this is his like time to get it right, going back into the cycles. I just didn't get that impression after beating Breath of the Wild. It didn't seem final.
Well, maybe
Obviously not because they made Tears of the Kingdom, which is a direct sequel to the game, but
okay.
I think what you're saying is like all these different, incarnations of the heroes. I think before they created the timeline, that's what the general idea was.
Yeah. And I mean, narratively, if you're going to be a villain, if you're going to be one that fails like spectacularly in the first game, it would make sense to kind of create a backup plan that affords you the most opportunity to recoup those losses.
For sure.
So instead of just
hedging his funds.
Yeah. Yes. So instead of to borrow from like Harry Potter, instead of just relying on the Horcruxes where you've got these 6 other parts of you split up, you're allowing yourself to just restart the cycle over and over and try new things to see which point you can get it right.
Do you think that he's already doing that, though?
Well, I mean, I'm not as well versed in the games, so I would have to kind of play more to find out. But just based off of what you were telling me about that curse to begin with and about these different timelines, it kind of makes me wonder if that's also kind of the approach that they're going, because it could also kind of be a narrative way to explain the differences in how things look throughout each of the games too.
So here's my interpretation of Ganon. So you have Ganon, which is the incarnation of malice, right?
Okay.
I don't think that there's any motivation to Ganon's actions other than just to cause despair to everything, right? Then you have the human form of Ganon, which is Ganondorf. And I think what you get with Ganondorf is a more sophisticated, a little more collected version of Ganon, who is not as powerful in the physical sense, but the intellect is more. He's thinking more. He's got a more processed thought process into how to get things done and intricately planning these things. Ganon is just like a fire. If you just let it burn, it will just burn. Ganondorf is just, he's a little more procedural. And I need to play Tears of the Kingdom because the villain is Ganondorf. So at the end of Breath of the Wild, you're fighting Ganon. You're fighting like the incarnation of evil. So you're not fighting Ganondorf. But in Tears of the Kingdom, you're getting Ganondorf. So I'm interested to see how Ganondorf, as the planner, the one who will formulate a plan for destruction, acts in that game.
Well, it also kind of brings up a little bit of a philosophical question. What's more evil? Just blind action, blind rage and hatred and malice, or something directed, strategic, and planned? Intentional.
I would think probably intentional would be more evil for sure.
So then potentially Ganondorf is actually more evil than Ganon.
I would say so. Yeah, I think Ganon is just hatred and malice.
Okay.
He's the chaotic evil. If you're looking at Dungeons and Dragons, I would say Ganondorf is probably like lawfully evil. Well, no. I would say he's lawfully evil because he acts on probably in principles that he believes in. Still evil, but he's acting on principles and morals that he believes in. But yeah. But I would say Ganondorf's probably more evil because he's thinking about it. He's like, how can I, even if it's for his own personal gain.
Yeah, but even with something that's less directed, something like Ganon that's more instinctual, you got to keep in mind that even base sort of reactions with creatures in nature are going to be for self-perpetuation and self-protection.
Like id? Are we talking are we getting that far into it? Like the id?
Or no, I mean like propagating the species, trying to preserve, your bloodline, trying to keep things going forward so that you have the best chances of survival. You're
saying that's more of Ganon? Ganon?
That's more of Ganon in terms of it could be more of a instinctual desire to survive and push himself through it, whereas Ganondorf would be the one to actually make the plans.
Correct. No, I agree with you completely. Yeah. Yeah, Ganondorf definitely seems to be...
I mean, it also raises some...
puppeteer.
It also raises some kind of interesting questions about the possibility for giving Ganondorf different motivations by having him reincarnated into these different forms. Like if he's brought up in a different culture each time, how does that affect his approach to causing problems?
I think that's actually talked about on different theory videos that I've seen. But the one I'm probably most familiar with is definitely Ocarina of Time because that's the one that I played that has Ganondorf. But he's also in Wind Waker. Ganondorf's in Wind Waker. Ganondorf's also in Twilight Princess. So I guess I would have to play those to see what the motivation is there, right?
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting series. I have my complaints about Breath of the Wild. I think it's a great beta game, but as its own standalone game, really fell short.
What would it have needed to kind of live up to your
I
expectations?
feel like just more purposeful content. Because essentially in Breath of the Wild, you literally can walk out into the cave, like in the beginning of the game, you can pick up a stick, or just pick up sticks, because you can. The cool part about the game is that like you can make weapons. Weapons have durability. Eventually, you get to a point where you get the Master Sword, but you can literally make any kind of. You can make like a spear. You can make a broadsword. You can make like a claymore. You can have like literally any kind of weapon you can think of that you can craft, which makes it cool. But you can go in there without doing any of the content in the game and go straight to the castle and fight Ganon if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. Like there's videos out there where people have done it. And you can do it naked, no armor, with a stick, and as long as you know the fight, you can beat him with the stick.
Okay.
Like that's how short the game can be. And I didn't feel like I got any reward from completing the game, going through and getting, freeing the different forces, other than maybe a couple like cutscenes.
Yeah, I can see how that would make you feel a little discouraged from that specific game.
It just didn't feel like a Zelda game. There was no dungeons. People will argue like there's like these little shrines that you go into that is basically just like a puzzle, but there's like 100 of them, and they just feel repetitive.
Okay.
The monsters inside there are all the same. It's the same little machines that you're fighting. It just didn't feel like it was a Zelda game. It was a great. If it was not a Zelda game and it was called like something else, it would have been a great game. But you're coming to me saying that this is Zelda. You better put out. You better have. You better have dungeons that feel purposeful and that they have a place of belonging in the area in Hyrule. They have to have some sort of lore. I just didn't feel like there was any lore in the game. It was just go get these warriors, get a couple memories, see what happened when they, died, and hopefully build an emotional connection with them. But I felt I couldn't get a connection with them because it was just, I don't know.
Do you feel like they were trying to rely a little too much on the established history in the previous games?
Maybe. I don't know what they were thinking with the games.
I mean, if that was supposed to be like a convergence point, then they may have been working under the premise that people would go into it and have a little understanding about Link's background, what he's already been through, and maybe some of these different games, and then rely on that to kind of develop that connection.
Yeah, I don't know. Because definitely every one of the four companions that helped seal Ganon in that castle is definitely a Gerudo. Is definitely, it's one of the Zoras. You have a bird race, and then you have a Goron. Like, so you get that familiarity, like it's there, like you have like, oh, I remember playing you. And what's interesting and why people thought, I forgot to add, why people were like, oh, this is a convergence, is because you saw races from the other timelines that were there.
Okay.
And so that's why people were like, oh, this is obviously a convergence of all three timelines, because creatures that didn't exist in the Fallen Hero timeline, that only existed in the Absent Hero timeline, was in Breath of the Wild.
So kind of a mishmash.
Yeah, it was like a convergence of all. It literally was like you were getting things that were in other games, like set pieces or races or something that they're all here in this world. So it's either way before or it's way after. And Nintendo's already confirmed that Skyward Sword is the first.
Okay.
And some of the and they were in there, but they've already said that Breath of the Wild does not partake before Ocarina of Time.
Okay.
So it's left to be determined that it has to be after that. but there's creatures and places that don't exist in certain timelines that exist in this story. There's like a mishmash of all these little different Easter eggs that are in here.
Do you think it could be leading towards something bigger?
I hope. And if it was, then yeah, I mean, I would enjoy it. I don't think it would make Breath of the Wild a better game. I think the flaw of the game is the actual content of the game. It wasn't the combat, because it was amazing. It wasn't the music. It was good, even though it didn't play any of like the themes that you had in Zelda. The world was huge, intricate, like it was beautiful. The crafting was fun. The cooking was fun. Like there was so many good things about the game. It was just didn't really feel like a Zelda game. And the fact that you're playing Link.
What would you think about a Zelda game where Link is at the beginning injured pretty severely, fails at the job, but doesn't die? Like he ends up coming back. He looks somewhat different, scarred something, and then he's having to work against the memories of the previous failure throughout the game to try to get what needs to be done. Yeah.
You're literally describing the story of Breath of the Wild.
Okay,
but the memories that you're uncovering is the content of Breath of the Wild. Okay. It doesn't really go back into like Ocarina of Time and stuff like that.
Okay.
And maybe that's in Tears of the Kingdom. I don't know. Maybe that's their intention to do for another game. I don't know.
Or maybe having a version...
That would be awesome.
Yeah, like a version of the character where they're not searching for the memories. They are intimately aware of their failure and what's going on. And the player gets to sort of experience what they're thinking or feeling through that failure. Might be a better option for the next one.
Yeah, no, I agree. But what you're saying here is you have to tell a story.
Pretty much, right? Yeah.
And there was no story in Breath of the Wild, which is my only complaint.
Yeah, and sometimes you're in the mood for a Big Mac where you just want to enjoy and have fun, and sometimes you want a steak. So this was not a higher quality story, I guess.
No, I mean you might like it. You might like it. If I were to rank it like any of the Zeldas in regard to story-wise, Skyward Sword is the way to go. There's twists in there that I didn't say when I was describing the story. Twist in there that's like, oh my god, like so good. If you're talking about the first one that that broke ground on Zelda, it was like, whoa, like this is the turning point for video games. Ocarina of Time, because that gave birth to 3D. If we're talking about like just purely like gameplay wise, it's probably Breath of the Wild. But yeah,
if you could pick one that has the best mixture of like gameplay, aesthetics, and story, which one would you say?
I think Ocarina of Time lacks the ergonomic gameplay. It's just outdated. So, but it's hard. I would put Breath of the Wild up there with Ocarina of Time and Skyward Sword, but for completely different reasons. Skyward Sword is great. The graphics are good. The combat's fun. The only thing that's awkward is you use the joystick laterally to do slashes and horizontally for like over the head swings.
Okay.
That some people didn't enjoy. I didn't find it to be that big of a deal, but some people hated it.
Okay.
And for just specifically for the controls alone, I know people that played only half the game and was like, I can't play this because of the controls. But the story was the best story out of all the Zelda games.
Do you think the people that disliked it are more of the button masher type players, the ones that wish they could just like hit the same button without having to change direction?
Possible. But if we're going on like combat alone for any of the Zelda games, it's Breath of the Wild. Like the combat is so streamlined. It's the best combat. They have the lock-on system. You can play it like a Dark Souls game if you want to. It's just a better, like when you find like a world boss, it's really fun to play.
Okay.
Yeah, really fun to play. It's a good game. It's just not a great Zelda game.
Fair enough.
Anything else that you can think of about Ocarina of Time that you liked a lot? Any last thoughts?
Let me think. No, I think we pretty much covered everything, man.
Well, all right. All right, man. Well, thank you for talking about the the best Zelda game ever made.
Fair enough. Happy to.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it.
No, anytime.
All right.